All right, so you're ready to tackle the expletif in French grammar.
That's right.
That's awesome. You're going for that pronunciator certificate.
I am. Yeah, it's a challenging one. This one's got me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, some of these sentences in your notes are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But we're going to break it down.
We are.
We're going to make it easy for you, and you're going to pass that test.
That's the goal.
So let's jump right into it. What is this no expletif thing?
Well, it's a tricky little part of French grammar, as you know. It's this little word ne that we add to certain sentences, but it's different from the regular negation with ne pas.
Okay.
Because it doesn't actually negate the verb.
So it's like a phantom no.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, but it's not really negating anything.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like a leftover from Old French. Back in the day, they used to just use ne by itself to negate things.
Okay.
But that's evolved into ne pas, as you know. And the expletif kind of stuck around in certain situations, but it doesn't actually make the sentence negative anymore.
Interesting. So then what does it do?
Well, it adds a certain nuance. It's a subtle kind of meaning, and it often comes up when we're talking about things that haven't happened yet or things we want to prevent.
I see. I'm looking through your notes here, and I see you've got a lot of questions about conjunctions like avant que and moins que.
Right.
So before or unless.
Exactly. Those are prime expletif territory.
Okay. So can you give us an example of how that works?
Sure. So let's take the sentence avant que je ne mange, which means before I eat.
Okay.
Now, the eating hasn't happened yet, right?
Right.
So the expletif is there to highlight that potential.
Okay, so it's not denying the eating. It's just saying, hey, this is a possibility.
Exactly. It's like a little flag saying, pay attention to this.
Okay, and it's the same with à moins que then.
Right. À moins que meaning unless.
Oh,
so like unless you study, you won't pass the test.
So that would be à moins que tu n'étudies, tu ne réussiras pas le test.
Perfect. You got it.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's complicated, but it's starting to make sense.
It is a bit tricky, but there's a logic to it once you start to see the patterns.
All right, so we've got the conjunctions down, but what about verbs? I see you've also got some questions about verbs like craindre, which means to fear.
Yes, verbs are another big area where no expletif pops up, and it's often with verbs that express fear, doubt, or prevention.
So like, I'm afraid he won't come.
Exactly. In French, that would be je crains qu'il ne vienne pas.
Okay, I see the new expletif is right in there with qu'il ne vienne.
Right, and it's adding that extra layer of apprehension, like I'm worried that this might not happen.
So it's not just about the fear itself, it's about the possibility of the thing you fear actually happening.
Exactly. It's like a grammatical knock on wood.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we've got conjunctions, we've got verbs, and I see you've got a bunch of other stuff in your notes here. Comparisons, indirect speech.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot more to explore.
We're just getting started, but for now, I think we've given our listener a good foundation to build on.
Absolutely. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
So we'll pick up on the rest of this in our next deep dive session.
Sounds good.
All right, so stay tuned for more Explétif adventures.
It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. All right, we'll see you next time.
See you then. Welcome back. Ready for round 2 with the Explétif.
Oh, yeah, bring it on. Those sentences are getting longer and more complex.
That's right. We're moving on to some tougher terrain, but don't worry, we'll navigate it together.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
So where do we start with these longer sentences?
Well, one thing that often signals an expletif is a subordinate clause.
Subordinate clause, remind me what those are again.
You got it. They're those clauses that can't stand alone as a sentence.
Right. They're like the sidekicks to the main verb.
Exactly. And when those sidekicks express something that didn't happen or might not happen, that's when expletif often comes into play.
Okay, I'm looking at an example in your notes here. He left without my seeing him.
Perfect example. So how would you say that in French?
Let me think. Il est parti sans que je ne le voie.
You nailed it. That sans que je ne le vois part, that's your subordinate clause.
Right. It's adding extra information to the main action of him leaving.
And the expletif is highlighting that the seeing didn't actually happen.
It's like a little disclaimer, a grammatical asterisk.
Exactly. And you'll see this pattern with infinitive constructions, too.
Infinitives, the two verbs.
Exactly. Like to eat, to sleep, to master the expletif.
Hopefully someday. So how do infinitives fit into this?
Well, they often follow a similar logic to the subordinate clauses.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Let's say she's afraid to speak in French. That would be elle a peur de ne pas parler.
I see the expletif is working with the pas to emphasize the not speaking.
Exactly. It's highlighting that fear that the infinitive action might not occur.
Okay, so subordinate clauses, infinitives, we're really getting into the nitty-gritty here.
We are. And another tricky thing is when you see Explétif appearing with ne pas in the same sentence.
Oh yeah, that sounds confusing.
It can be, but the key is to understand the scope of each negation.
Okay, break that down for me.
So one ne pas pair will be negating the main verb,
right?
While the other will be negating the subordinate clause or the infinitive phrase.
So it's like two negations working in parallel, but on different parts of the sentence.
Exactly. Let's look at an example. I don't fear that he won't come.
Okay, that's a mouthful already in English.
It is, but it's a perfect illustration of this concept. So in French, it would be, je ne crains pas qu'il ne vienne pas.
Whoa. Okay, there's a lot going on there.
There is, but take it step by step. The first ne pas is negating craindre, so I don't fear.
Okay, got it.
And then the second ne pas is negating the qu'il ne vient pas, which means that he won't come.
So we're negating the fear, and then we're negating the thing we're not fearing.
Precisely. It's a double negation, but each one has its own specific target.
Okay, my brain is definitely doing gymnastics here, but I think I'm getting it.
That's great. And remember, the Explétif is always tied to that subordinate clause or infinitive.
Right, it's adding that extra layer of meaning while the main negation takes care of the main verb.
Exactly. You're becoming an Explétif detective.
I'm trying, but there's still so much to learn. My notes mention causative verbs, concessive clauses, all sorts of things.
We've only just scratched the surface, but I think it's time for a little break.
Agreed. We'll regroup and tackle the rest in part 3.
Sounds like a plan. We'll dive even deeper then.
Looking forward to it.
Huh?
Okay, so we're back for the final round of our Explétif deep dive.
That's right. Are you ready to conquer this beast of French grammar?
I think so, but honestly, I'm still a little nervous about that pronunciator certificate test.
I understand, but honestly, you've been doing great. You're picking up on all the nuances.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So what's on the agenda for today?
Well, we've still got a few tricky areas to cover, like different types of verbs.
Oh, right. I remember seeing something in my notes about transitive and intransitive verbs.
Exactly. It's easy to forget that verbs themselves can influence whether or not we use an expletive.
Okay, so for our listeners who might need a refresher, what's the difference between those two types of verbs again?
Sure. So a transitive verb needs a direct object, something for the action to act upon.
Right, like I eat the apple.
Exactly. Eat is transitive because it needs that apple.
And intransitive verbs, they can stand alone.
Right, like I sleep, no object needed.
Okay, so how does this all relate to ne explétif?
Well, let's take the sentence. I saw him leave.
Okay.
In French, that would be je l'ai vu partir.
Okay.
But if you want to say I didn't see him leave, you would use ne explétif. Je ne l'ai pas vu partir.
So even though see is a perception verb and not a fear verb or a doubt verb, we still use ne explétif there.
Right, because it's emphasizing the lack of perception, the fact that the seeing didn't happen.
Interesting. So it seems like the type of verb, even if it's transitive, can sometimes influence whether we use ne explétif.
That's right. It's a subtle distinction, but it's important to be aware of.
Okay, so transitive verbs are more likely to use ne explétif. What about intransitive verbs?
Intransitive verbs usually stick with the standard ne pas négation.
Okay, so like he didn't sleep well would just be il n'a pas bien dormi.
Exactly. No ne explétif needed there.
Got it. So another clue for our ne explétif detective work, pay attention to the type of verb.
Absolutely. It's all about those little details.
Okay, I'm looking through my notes and I see we've also got hypothetical situations to cover.
Ah, yes. Those are always fun.
I don't know about fun, but they definitely add another layer of complexity.
That's true, but they also provide a great opportunity to see no expletif in action.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure, let's say, if he were to come, I would be happy.
Okay.
In French, that would be si venait, je serais content.
Okay, so the si clause sets up the hypothetical.
Exactly, and the no expletif is there to emphasize the possibility.
Even though it's a hypothetical situation, we're still acknowledging the potential for him not to come.
Right, it's like we're saying, if he were to not come.
Wow, French grammar can get pretty meta.
It can definitely make your head spin sometimes.
All right, so we've got verb types, we've got hypothetical situations. What else is there?
One more big one-verb mood.
Oh, yes, the subjunctive.
That's right. You know, the one you love to hate?
I wouldn't say I hate it, but it definitely has a reputation for being tricky.
It does, but it's also very elegant. And when it comes to ne expletif, it's a key player.
Okay, so how does the subjunctive fit into all of this?
Well, you see, sentences that use the subjunctive often express wishes, doubts, or commands.
Okay.
And those are all contexts where net expletive feels right at home.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, how about, it is important that he not speak.
Okay.
In French, that would be, il est important qu'il ne parle pas.
Okay, I see the new expletif is right in there with the subjunctive qu'il ne parle pas.
Exactly. The subjunctive is highlighting the importance of him not speaking, so we use net expletif to reinforce that.
So if I see a subjunctive verb and a negative idea, that's a good sign to consider net expletif.
You're really starting to see the patterns now.
I think so, but I have to admit, I'm still a little intimidated by all of this.
That's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
This is advanced French grammar we're talking about. It takes time and practice to master.
You're right. I guess I just need to be patient with myself.
Exactly. And remember, the most important thing is to keep learning and keep exploring the language.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about the expletif.
At least for now, but remember, there's always more to discover.
That's true. Well, I want to thank you for guiding us through this complex topic.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, good luck on that pronunciator certificate test. I know you're going to do great.
You've got this. And to everyone else, keep diving deep into French or whatever language you're learning.
Absolutely. The journey of language learning is full of amazing discoveries. Until next time.
See you then.